I never believed in chance encounters. Most of my life had been carefully structured: work, gym, friends, a weekend beer or two, and the occasional date that usually fizzled out before it could spark into something meaningful. But sometimes life takes you by the collar, drags you down an unexpected street, and sets you face to face with someone who turns your whole world upside down. It was late spring when it happened. The city had that restless energy that comes after a long winter, the kind that makes people stay out longer, talk louder, smile more often. I was leaving work later than usual, my tie loosened, laptop bag hanging off one shoulder, when I stopped by a quiet coffee shop I hadn't noticed before. The place wasn't remarkable from the outside: a glass front, a chalkboard menu with a few shaky drawings of lattes, and a couple of small tables out on the sidewalk. But as soon as I stepped inside, I was hit by the scent of fresh coffee beans and warm vanilla. It was cozy, dimly lit, and strangely intimate for such a public space. And that's where I saw her. She was sitting near the window, a book open in her hands, her head bent low as strands of dark hair spilled across her face. She wasn't the kind of woman who demanded attention by being loud or extravagant. It was something subtler, an aura, a quiet confidence, as if the world around her existed only to give her space to breathe. I remember thinking she looked like she belonged in another time. Maybe it was the way she was dressed: simple, elegant, with a fitted white blouse tucked into a soft skirt, or maybe it was the way she sat, perfectly straight, one leg crossed over the other, like she was born to be admired but had no interest in being noticed. Still, I noticed. I should have walked past her, ordered my coffee, and gone home to binge-watch something brainless. But my feet didn't listen. Instead, I found myself moving closer, stealing glances at the cover of her book. Hemingway. A Farewell to Arms. I smiled before I could stop myself. "You know," I said, breaking the sacred silence of strangers, "that's not exactly light reading for a Thursday evening." She looked up slowly, as if giving me time to reconsider. And then her eyes met mine, sharp, curious, with a spark that made my chest tighten. "Neither is life," she replied, closing the book halfway. Her voice was calm, smooth, the kind of voice that could wrap around you like silk. I chuckled, caught off guard. Fair point. But still, most people would go for something easier. A magazine. A rom-com on Netflix. "And what about you?" she asked, tilting her head slightly. "What do you usually choose?" It was such a simple question, yet the way she asked it made me feel exposed, as if she were trying to peek behind the curtain of who I really was. "Me?" I shrugged. "Usually a beer and a basketball game." Her lips curved into a small smile, not mocking, just amused. "Then maybe you need Hemingway more than I do." That was the first time I laughed genuinely in weeks. There was something disarming about her, something that made me want to sit down and stay, even though every reasonable voice in my head told me she was just another stranger in a city full of them. But I didn't walk away. Instead, I asked, "Mind if I join you?" Her eyes lingered on me for a second, searching, as if weighing whether I was worth her time. Then she closed the book fully, placed it gently on the table, and gestured to the empty chair across from her. And just like that, the story began. We talked for hours. About books, about the city, about the strange little moments that made life interesting. I learned her name was Elena. She worked in publishing, of course she did, and had a love for old literature and obscure cafes. She had a way of speaking that made even ordinary details feel captivating, like every sentence was part of a bigger story. I caught myself leaning forward, studying her hands as she spoke, the way her fingers curled around her coffee cup, the way her lips curved when she paused to think. There was an elegance in her, but also a subtle fire that flickered whenever our eyes met. The conversation shifted from casual to personal. She asked about my work, my passions, what I wanted from life. No one had asked me those questions in such a direct way before, and it made me stumble, laugh nervously, try to piece together answers that made sense. She seemed to enjoy my discomfort, not cruelly, but as if peeling back layers until she found something real. At one point, she leaned closer, resting her chin on her hand, and said, "You don't let people in easily, do you?" Her words hit me harder than I expected. I felt my throat tighten, my instinct to deflect with a joke rising fast. But then I saw the honesty in her gaze, and I surprised myself by admitting, not usually. But right now, I don't mind. Her smile was small but powerful, the kind of smile that felt like a secret. The hours slipped away unnoticed. The cafe emptied, the barista cleaned tables, and finally, the lights dimmed in a not-so-subtle hint that it was closing time. We both stood reluctantly, as if waking from a dream. Outside, the air was warm, the streets buzzing with late-night laughter. I walked her to the corner, unsure if I should push my luck. She paused before crossing the street, turned to me, and said, "You're not what I expected." "Good or bad?" I asked. "Different," she replied. Then, after a beat, "Maybe good." The light changed, and she stepped off the curb, leaving me standing there with her words echoing in my head. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying every detail: the way she looked at me, the way her voice dipped when she asked me something personal, the spark of something dangerous yet irresistible. I told myself it was just a conversation, just a coincidence. But deep down, I knew better. Something had shifted. And as much as I wanted to pretend otherwise, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The next few days were a blur of routine. Work, meetings, traffic, all the dull machinery of everyday life. But under the surface, something had changed. I caught myself checking my phone more often, scrolling through my contacts even though I didn't have her number. I walked past the same cafe twice, pretending I was just craving another coffee. On the third evening, I found her again. She was there, at the same window table, the same calm posture, though this time she was writing in a notebook instead of reading. The moment I stepped in, her eyes flicked up, as if she had been expecting me. "You again," she said with a small smile. "Don't sound so disappointed," I replied, sliding into the chair across from her without asking this time. Her laugh was soft, musical. "I'm not. Just surprised. I didn't think you were the type to haunt cafes." "Maybe I wasn't. Until now." Something flickered across her face: amusement, maybe curiosity, but she didn't push. Instead, she closed her notebook and leaned back, studying me. There's something unnerving about being watched like that, as if every nervous tick, every twitch of the mouth, every hesitation is being catalogued. Yet I didn't want to look away. "So," she said after a pause, "what made you come back?" I should have played it cool. I should have said I liked the coffee or that I just happened to be in the neighborhood. But honesty slipped out before I could stop it. "You." Her lips parted slightly, and for a second, the air between us tightened. Then she tilted her head, a slow, knowing smile curving across her face. "Dangerous answer," she murmured. "Is it the wrong one?" "That depends on what you expect from me." The way she said it low, almost teasing, sent a shiver down my spine. She was right, it was dangerous. But something about that danger pulled me in, made me lean forward instead of retreat. I don't know what I expect, I admitted. But I want to find out. Her eyes lingered on mine, searching again, weighing. Then she said, maybe I'll let you. That evening bled into another long conversation, but this time the tone was different. Lighter in some ways, sharper in others. We teased, we tested boundaries. She asked me about past relationships, I gave her half-truths. She told me about her first job, about the time she almost moved abroad but changed her mind at the last second. I found myself drawn to every detail. The way she tapped her fingers against her cup when she was thinking. The way she occasionally looked away, as if giving me a moment to breathe, then snapped her gaze back like she knew I was watching. At one point, I made her laugh so hard she covered her mouth with her hand, embarrassed. It was a small, vulnerable gesture, and I wanted to reach across the table, take her hand away, and see that unfiltered smile fully. But I didn't. Not yet. When we finally stepped outside, the air was cooler than the last time, a breeze running through the street. She walked close, not quite touching me but near enough that I felt the space between us shrinking. At the corner where we had parted before, she paused again. So, she said, are you going to keep showing up here until I get tired of seeing your face? Depends, I said. Are you tired yet? Her eyes glinted with amusement. Not tonight. For a second, I thought she might let me walk her home. My pulse quickened at the thought, the image of us side by side down the quiet streets, maybe brushing shoulders, maybe something more. But then she stepped back. Good night, she said, and before I could answer, she was gone, slipping into the crowd with that same calm grace. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about her. The way she smiled, the way she teased, the way she seemed to know exactly how to keep me guessing. I wanted more. Not just her company, I wanted the layers beneath, the hidden corners she hadn't shown me yet. And maybe, just maybe, she wanted me to chase them. The following week, our meetings became a rhythm. Not planned, never arranged, but always happening as if by fate. I'd walk into the café, and there she'd be, waiting with her book or her notebook, her eyes lifting as if she'd known I was coming all along. Each time, we peeled back another layer. She told me about her childhood summers by the sea. I told her about my failed attempts to play guitar in college. We argued about books, about movies, about whether love was a choice or something that just happened. But it wasn't just talk. Sometimes, when she leaned across the table, her hand would brush mine by accident or maybe not by accident. Sometimes her laugh would linger too long, her gaze too steady. The air between us thickened with something unspoken, something electric. One night, I walked her further than usual, down quieter streets where the noise of the city faded. We stopped under a flickering street lamp, the shadows stretching long across the pavement. She turned to me, arms crossed lightly over her chest, and said, "You're persistent." "I've been called worse," I replied. Her lips twitched into a smile, but her eyes stayed serious. "You don't even know me." "Maybe not. But I want to." The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was heavy, charged. I could see her debating with herself, see the battle behind her calm exterior. Then, in a voice so soft I almost missed it, she said, "Careful what you wish for." Before I could answer, she stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the faint trace of her perfume, something floral, something sharp. My chest tightened, my instincts screamed to close the last inch between us, to pull her into me. But she didn't give me the chance. She touched my arm lightly, almost tenderly, and whispered, "Good night." And just like that, she slipped away again, leaving me standing in the glow of the street lamp, my pulse racing. I went home restless, pacing my apartment like a man possessed. Every word, every glance, every almost touch replayed in my mind until I was half certain I was losing it. She was playing some kind of game, I knew it. But it wasn't cruel. It was deliberate. Like she wanted to see how far I'd go, how long I'd hold on. And God help me, I was willing to play. The next time I saw her, something had shifted. She was dressed differently, less formal, more casual, though no less stunning. A simple black top, jeans, a faint touch of lipstick. She looked less like the mysterious woman in the cafe and more like someone real, approachable. Yet the effect was even more dangerous. "You're late," she said when I walked in, though we had never agreed on a time. Maybe I wanted to make an entrance. She said, sipping her coffee. "Or maybe you just like testing me." I sat down, leaning closer than usual. "And how am I doing?" For a moment, she didn't answer. She just held my gaze, her eyes dark and unreadable. Then, slowly, she smiled. Well enough to keep me curious. That night, the tension finally cracked. We were leaving the cafe, walking side by side as usual, when a sudden rain started pouring down, drenching the street in seconds. We ran for cover beneath an awning, laughing breathlessly, water dripping from our hair and clothes. Her laugh faded as she looked at me, her face inches from mine, her chest rising and falling quickly. The world blurred around us, the rain, the city, the rush of people running for shelter. All I saw was her. And in that suspended moment, neither of us moved away. Her hand brushed against mine, tentative, then bolder. My breath caught. I turned slightly, enough that our shoulders touched, enough that the warmth of her body cut through the chill of the rain. I wanted to kiss her. God, I wanted it so badly it hurt. But just as I leaned in, she whispered, "Not yet." And though it nearly drove me mad, I obeyed. Because the look in her eyes told me that when the moment finally came, it would be worth every second of waiting. After that night in the rain, something changed. We didn't speak about it, but the air between us was different. Every glance lasted longer, every word carried an undertone that hadn't been there before. It was as if a line had been drawn, and both of us were standing right at the edge, daring the other to step across first. The cafe meetings continued, but they felt charged now, like each conversation was just an excuse to stay close. I noticed how she leaned in more often, how her knee would brush mine under the table and she wouldn't move it right away. I noticed the way her laughter softened when it was only for me, the way her eyes lingered on my mouth when I spoke. One evening, I decided not to wait any longer. She was already there when I arrived, a glass of wine instead of coffee in her hand. That alone told me the mood was different. She didn't hide her smile when she saw me. "You're predictable," she teased. "Or dependable," I countered, sliding into my seat. Her eyes glimmered. "I haven't decided which yet." We talked, as always, but it didn't feel like small talk anymore. It felt like circling something dangerous, like pacing around a fire without touching it. She asked about the kind of women I usually dated, and I admitted I didn't really have a type. Then what are you looking for? She asked. You, I almost said. But instead, I leaned back, studying her, and replied, something real. Her expression softened, just slightly, before she hid it behind her glass. But I saw it. Later, as we walked outside, she surprised me. Come with me, she said, her tone casual but her eyes sharp. I didn't ask where. I didn't need to. I just followed. We walked through side streets until we reached a small bookstore tucked between taller buildings. It was closed, the lights off, but she pulled a key from her bag and unlocked the door. You work here? I asked, stepping inside. Sometimes, she said, flicking on a dim lamp. Perks of knowing the owner. The store smelled like old paper and dust, shelves crammed with books stacked high, narrow aisles leading into shadowy corners. Why here? I asked. She smiled faintly. Because no one will interrupt us. The way she said it sent a rush of heat through me. We wandered the aisles, her fingers brushing over the spines of books as she walked. I followed, my pulse quickening. She stopped in the poetry section, pulling down a thin book and handing it to me. Read, she said simply. I opened it at random, my voice low in the silence as I read a few lines about desire, about longing unspoken. She watched me closely, her head tilted, her lips slightly parted. When I finished, she stepped closer. Too close. You have a good voice, she murmured. Strong. Steady. Her hand brushed my arm, light as a whisper. I froze, caught between wanting to grab her and not wanting to break the fragile moment. You like control, don't you? She asked suddenly, her eyes glinting. The question caught me off guard. What makes you say that? The way you look at me. Like you're holding yourself back. Like you want to take, but you're waiting for permission. She was right. And the way she said it made my restraint snap. I took a step forward, closing the space between us. My hand found her waist, my thumb brushing the curve of her hip. She didn't flinch. She didn't step back. Instead, she leaned in, her breath warm against my neck. But just when I thought she would let me kiss her, she slipped out of my grasp, moving to the other side of the aisle with a sly smile. Not yet, she said softly. The same words as before. A deliberate echo. And I realized then she was testing me. The next days were torture and thrill all at once. She would let me get close, let me touch her hand, her shoulder, the small of her back. And then she would retreat, pulling away before it could go further. I should have been frustrated. Maybe I was. But more than that, I was captivated. She wasn't rejecting me, she was drawing me in, step by step, making sure I wanted her enough to fight for it. And I did. God, I did. One night, we didn't meet at the cafe. Instead, she texted me for the first time. Come over. No explanation, no address, I already had it from the bookstore visit. I arrived at her apartment just past 9. She opened the door barefoot, wearing a loose sweater that slipped off one shoulder. For the first time, she looked less like the composed woman in the cafe and more like something raw, intimate. Don't just stand there, she said, stepping aside. Her apartment was small but filled with character, stacks of books, a record player, a half-finished painting on the wall. It smelled faintly of jasmine. She poured us wine and sat on the couch, tucking one leg beneath her. I sat beside her, the distance smaller than it had ever been. For a while, We talked like always, though the tension was unbearable now. Her knee brushed mine. My hand rested on the back of the couch, inches from her shoulder. Finally, she turned to me. "Do you always wait this long?" she asked, her voice low. The challenge was clear. This time, I didn't hesitate. I leaned in and kissed her. Her lips were soft, warm, and the moment they touched mine, the world tilted. She kissed me back slowly at first, then with a hunger that matched my own. Her hand slid into my hair, pulling me closer, while mine gripped her waist, pulling her into me. The restraint I had been holding cracked wide open. She broke the kiss just long enough to whisper, "Finally." And then we lost ourselves in it. The night blurred after that, hands exploring, lips tracing skin, laughter breaking between kisses. We didn't rush, though the heat between us was undeniable. Every touch felt deliberate, every breath shared heavy with meaning. At one point, she pulled back, her eyes searching mine with that same intensity she always carried. "You're different," she said quietly. "So are you." For the first time, her smile wasn't teasing. It was soft, almost vulnerable. We stayed like that for hours, sometimes kissing, sometimes just talking in low voices, sometimes sitting in silence, her head on my shoulder. By the time dawn crept through the curtains, I knew something had shifted again. We weren't just circling the fire anymore. We had stepped into it. And there was no going back. Morning came too quickly. I woke to find Elena curled against me, her breathing slow and steady, her hair a dark halo across the pillow. The city was stirring outside, cars humming faintly in the distance, but inside her apartment, time felt suspended. For a long moment, I just watched her, memorizing the curve of her lips, the softness of her expression in sleep. She looked so different from the Elena I had first met, the sharp, composed woman with a book in her hands. Here, she was vulnerable. Real. I wanted to stay in that moment forever. But eventually, she stirred, blinking awake. Her eyes found mine, and for the first time, she didn't try to mask her smile. "Still here," she murmured. "Did you expect me to run?" She stretched lazily, the sweater slipping further down her shoulder. "Most do. After the first night, they don't stick around for breakfast." I reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Then I guess I'm not most." Her eyes softened, but she said nothing, just leaned into my touch briefly before slipping out of bed. That morning was strangely domestic. She made coffee while I wandered her apartment, tracing the shelves of books and half-finished paintings. It felt like stepping deeper into her world, a world she didn't usually let others see. Over coffee, we didn't talk about what had happened the night before. We didn't need to. It hung in the air, understood, undeniable. Instead, we talked about trivial things: the weather, music, a new restaurant she wanted to try. Yet even those simple words felt loaded, as if every sentence carried the weight of something more. When I finally left, she kissed me softly at the door. Not hungry, not teasing, just a quiet promise. From then on, everything changed. We stopped pretending it was coincidence. She texted me now, sometimes late at night, sometimes in the middle of the day, "Come over." Or "Meet me at the café." I never hesitated. Our connection grew stronger, deeper. We fell into a rhythm of stolen moments: dinners, long walks, nights tangled together in her apartment. And with each moment, I learned more about her. She was passionate, but guarded. Playful, but cautious. She could be fire one second and ice the next, leaving me guessing, chasing, desperate for the next glimpse of what lay beneath her layers. But I didn't mind the chase. In fact, it made me want her more. One night, we lay tangled on her couch, a movie forgotten on the screen. Her head rested on my chest, her hand tracing idle patterns on my arm. "Why me?" I asked quietly, the question slipping out before I could stop it. She lifted her head, her eyes sharp even in the dim light. "Why you what? Why me, out of everyone? You could have anyone." Her lips curved into a small smile, though her eyes didn't soften. "Maybe. But not anyone would make me curious." "Curious about what?" "About what you'll do next. About how much you're willing to give. About whether you'll stay." Her words cut deeper than she probably realized. I tightened my arm around her, meeting her gaze. "I'm not going anywhere." For a moment, something flickered in her eyes, hope, maybe fear, but then she kissed me, long and slow, as if sealing my promise. But promises are fragile things. The more time we spent together, the more complicated it became. I started canceling plans with friends, leaving work early, rearranging my life around her texts. She had become the center of my gravity, pulling me in no matter how much I resisted. And sometimes, she pulled away. She would go quiet for a day, 2 days. No texts, no cafe meetings. When I asked, she brushed it off, busy with work. Or needed space. But I felt the distance, sharp and cold. And every time, just when I thought she might be slipping away completely, she pulled me back with a look, a touch, a word whispered in the dark. It was a game, I realized. But I wasn't sure if she was playing with me, or with herself. One evening, I arrived at her apartment to find her different. Restless. Pacing. A glass of wine in her hand, though it was barely past 7. "What's wrong?" I asked, closing the door behind me. "Nothing," she said quickly. Too quickly. "Elena." She stopped pacing, looking at me with eyes sharper than I'd ever seen. "You want honesty?" "Yes." She took a deep breath, then said, "I don't trust easily. I don't let people in. And every time I do, they leave." Her words hung in the air, raw and unpolished. I stepped closer, cupping her face gently. "I'm not them." Her lips trembled into a bitter smile. "That's what they all said." Before I could respond, she kissed me hard, urgent, almost desperate. And in that moment, I realized her passion wasn't just desire. It was fear. Fear of losing, fear of being left behind. I held her tighter, kissing her back with everything I had, trying to prove with lips and hands what words couldn't. That night, we didn't just make love. We clung to each other like two people afraid the other might disappear. Afterward, she lay against me, her breath warm on my chest. In the quiet, I finally asked, "What are you so afraid of?" She didn't answer at first. Then, in a whisper barely audible, she said, "That I'll want you too much." Her confession sent a shiver through me. Because I realized I was afraid of the same thing. The days that followed were heavier, more intense. We were no longer just flirting around the edges of something, we were in it, fully, dangerously. Every kiss was deeper, every touch lingered longer. We began to blur the lines between lust and love, between need and want. And yet, beneath it all, I could feel the shadows. The secrets she hadn't told me, the walls she still kept hidden. I didn't know where this would lead. I only knew I couldn't stop. She had become my fire, my storm, my addiction. And I was willing to burn for her. By the time autumn arrived, Elena and I were inseparable. At least, that's how it felt. My days revolved around her, her messages, her moods, her silence, her laughter. Every choice I made seemed to orbit the possibility of being with her again. And yet, the closer we became, the more unpredictable she grew. Some nights she was all fire, pulling me to her with a hunger that left no room for doubt. Other nights, she retreated into silence, her eyes distant, her touch absent, as if some invisible wall had risen between us. I told myself I could handle it. That the highs were worth the lows. But in the back of my mind, a question gnawed at me: how long could we walk this tightrope without falling? One night, I found out. She had invited me over late, her message short and sharp: come. When I arrived, she was pacing again, wine glass in hand, her sweater slipping carelessly off her shoulder. What's wrong? I asked. She turned, eyes flashing. You're getting too close. The words hit me like a slap. Too close. Yes. She set the glass down hard on the table. I didn't want this. I didn't want you to matter this much. I stepped closer, my chest tight. So what? You want me to leave? Her silence was answer enough. For a moment, anger surged through me. After everything, after the nights, the promises, the fire between us, she wanted to push me away. But then I saw the fear in her eyes. Not rejection. Fear. Elena, I said softly, reaching for her hand. You don't have to run. Her fingers trembled in mine. You don't understand. People always run. And if you don't, I might ruin it myself. Then let me decide, I said firmly. Stop making the choice for me. Her breath caught, her walls faltering. And in that instant, she pulled me to her, kissing me with a ferocity that tasted of desperation and surrender all at once. That night, we crossed the final line. It wasn't just passion, it was everything. Every unspoken fear, every hidden longing, every piece of ourselves we'd been holding back. The room became our world, the hours slipping away as we gave in fully, recklessly. There was no hesitation this time. No retreat. No, not yet. Only us. Only now. When morning came, the light spilling through her curtains felt different. Softer. Warmer. She lay against me, her hand resting lightly on my chest, her breathing calm. For the first time, I felt not just desire, but peace. She stirred, her eyes meeting mine. You should know. I don't do this. I don't let people in like this. I know, I said. And you should also know. I'm terrified. I smiled faintly, brushing my fingers over her cheek. So am I. Her laugh was quiet, shaky, but real. And in that moment, I knew we had stepped beyond games, beyond walls, beyond fear. We had reached the point of no return. The weeks that followed weren't perfect. We still argued. We still had moments of distance, of silence. But something had shifted. She trusted me now, in her own way. She let me see parts of her world she had kept locked away, old scars, old memories, the softer truths beneath her armor. And in return, I gave her everything I had. My time. My loyalty. My heart. It wasn't always easy. Love never is. But it was real. And as we sat together one evening, watching the city lights from her balcony, she leaned against me and whispered, "You stayed." I kissed her hair and held her closer. "I told you I would." Looking back, I realize I never believed in chance encounters. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe some people are meant to collide, no matter how carefully we plan our lives. Elena wasn't what I expected. She was more complicated, maddening, intoxicating. And in the end, she wasn't just a chapter in my story. She was the story.